However, and even interesting that those tax cuts I mentioned over time and tips, they're only 2.5 years before they expire. So they're due to have a positive impact for the Republicans. However, even without the tax bill, Donald Trump's sort of bull in a china closet way of governing, everything from tariffs to laying off federal employees to
Mm.
destroying our investment in science and the universities, all of that has created a very uncertain, chaotic, and fearful environment in the United States.
Now, what about this big, beautiful bill? Do you believe this law? It sets out to cut taxes by $5 trillion over 10 years. It also would cut welfare and medical insurance for the less well off. Do you believe, are you one of those who think it's going to be a political game changer? And if you do, tell me why, because that's not certain, is it?
No, it's not certain. Just because nothing in politics is certain. One of the oldest aphorisms is that a week is a long time in politics. Who knows what will come up in October, November of 2026? But certainly in the short run, this is a very unpopular bill. It has a few good things for the less well-to-do. No taxes on tips and no taxes on overtime.
Yes.
But 17 million Americans will lose their health care. It's estimated between 50 and 100,000 extra people will die per year for lack of the health care.
Yeah.
And it's the largest transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich in the history of mankind.
Yeah, I mean, the Republicans have crafted this piece of legislation, haven't they, to mitigate the political impact. The tax cuts in the bill, they come first, and the cuts in medical insurance for the less well off, they come after the midterm elections. The Medicaid cuts
Yeah,
could
those
that could
17
work for the Republicans, couldn't it?
Yeah, it will. However, and even interesting that those tax cuts I mentioned over time and tips, they're only 2.5 years before they expire. So they're due to have a positive impact for the Republicans. However, even without the tax bill, Donald Trump's sort of bull in a china closet way of governing, everything from tariffs to laying off federal employees to
Mm.
destroying our investment in science and the universities, all of that has created a very uncertain, chaotic, and fearful environment in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, one reason why the big beautiful bill may not work in favour of your party. I was reading an interesting analysis on this, which argued that there are a number of states where the Republicans have refused to expand Medicaid. States like Texas, Kentucky, Georgia, and those states keep voting Republican. And the GOP, they keep on gaining in those states which extended Medicaid under Democratic Party governors.
Yeah, and it's the dilemma and the difference, I think, is that it's harder to take away a benefit that somebody has than to not give it to them in the first place. Those folks in Kentucky and Texas never had the advantage of having health insurance, so theirs is not stripped away. Also, most of those places that expanded, that didn't expand it, we Democrats were never really competitive there to begin with. There's, as you know, with 435 House seats, there's only 60 or so that are going to be competitive. So that's where our focus is. How are those people affected?
Yeah, and isn't it also a fairly accurate rule that poorer people, they tend to vote less often than better off voters? And again, that could work against your party. What are the lessons for you, Congressman, on the defeat in 2024? Generally argued, the Democrats were out of touch with a large section of voters that you can count on, have to count on, to vote Democrat. Now, if that's true, and do you accept that, how do you get back in touch?
No, I don't totally accept that. I mean, that is partially true. And it's partially true with the Republicans. Our voter bases continue to change. They used to do very well with the upper middle class, who overwhelmingly vote Democratic right now. It used to be that the earlier you went to work in the morning, the more likely you were to vote Democrat. That's not true anymore either. But it was only a 1.4% difference. It was very small.
Mm.
And if you just add up the terrible effects of inflation, which was the number one issue, we handled it better than many countries, but costs still went up an awful lot. And just because the percentage of inflation came down, the costs didn't come down. And then there was the fact that we had basically a 9-week presidential candidate that Joe Biden pulled out at the end of July. And so we had a relatively quiet president who did a good job, but was not a good messenger for those 4 years he was in office. And then you have lingering racism and misogyny. It was a black woman in a country that's never elected a woman, and the one black president was our Barack Obama, who was, um, a unicorn,
Mm.
a once in a lifetime type candidate.
Okay, interesting. Once in a lifetime candidate, which implies, I don't know if you quite mean to imply it, that another black candidate would not win.
I think it could. Wes Moore, who's
Hmm.
the Rhodes Scholar, Army veteran, West Point graduate, governor of Maryland right now, could be a very good candidate and could win.
All right.
I mean, he's won in Maryland, which is certainly not a majority black state.
Okay, those are stories to watch very carefully in the future. But for now, thank you, Congressman Don Beyer of Virginia. Thank you. Now, I want to just give you this statement from Downing Street. President Macron says the statement has said France's relationship with the UK is a game changer. He met Keir Starmer today to talk about issues including the migrant crisis. A Downing Street spokesman sent out a reading saying the Prime Minister met the French President in Downing Street. They reflected on the state visit of the President, agreeing it had been an important representation of the deep ties between our two countries. They talked about joint working, the desire to deepen the partnership. At the PM, it is said, welcome the news that EDF would take a 12.5% stake in Sizewell C nuclear plant. The leaders agreed on tackling the threat of irregular migration and small boat crossings as a shared priority that requires shared solutions. The statement goes on, but we will see, very, very soon, whether those warm words result in an agreement on joint efforts to control migration, exchanging migrants, as it were, one side of the channel to the other, to the point that crossing the channel is deterred, or at least that's the plan, if it becomes a plan. Now, coming up after 5.
Putin, I said, if you go in to Ukraine with Obama in Moscow, I'm telling you, I have no choice. The public wants the public. So he goes like, I don't believe you. He said, no way, and I said, way.
A recording of President Trump at a donors' dinner saying that he told President Putin if he invaded Ukraine, he would bomb Moscow. And there's more of the same, which I'll tell you about very shortly. Now, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has said he could not confirm Trump made the comments at all to Putin. I'll be talking to a former envoy to Ukraine working for Donald Trump about all of that. It's now 4:58. I'm John Pinar on Times Radio Drive with Barclays Business Banking. Find out how Barclays can help move your business forward. Search Barclays Business.